this way.
This is the final part of the Cultural Arts, Year 3, Elements and Principles of Art. And this year we're going to focus on the composition and photography.
Do it this way.
And you're Kelly?
It's Kelly.
So today we're going to talk about the connection between light and some of our camera settings. We're going to apply elements and principles of art. We're going to talk about the vocabulary of the composition and photography. How many of you like to take pictures? It's fun, isn't it? But sometimes they don't turn out quite right. So these are some points, and hopefully you'll get some pointers here to make better pictures. We're going to explore the concepts that make visually pleasing photography, and we're going to encourage you to experiment with making pictures. If you were here before, maybe you have some of this about the art, because it may have been a lesson before. I don't know if you all did it or not. Because this is year 3 in the series. Yeah. It says this is from year 1, that part of the art. So let's start by reviewing the photography category in the cultural arts exhibit. Evaluating and judging photography can be somewhat subjective because it depends on who the judge is. And it's important to know that there is a difference between the actual subject matter or the content, what is the photograph of, and the technical competence with which the photography was made. Is the subject in focus? How is the exposure? Is it well lit, or is it too dark, or is it too bright? Is the photograph interesting enough that the viewer will want to look at it for an extended period of time, more than a few seconds, regardless of the subject matter? So does your picture draw people in? You want to stay there and linger and look at it? Here, composition refers to how the elements or the objects in the photo are arranged. So when we're judging, or someone's judging with the KEHA criteria, we're looking for originality, the content itself, the clarity of the picture and the content in the photo, technical competence, and the composition, what is actually in the photograph, how it's arranged. So although we're not looking at or going to talk about specifically how to use a camera, does anybody have a fancy camera with the lens and all that? My son has one, and he comes over and he starts talking about all these, you need to do this, you need to do that, and if you want to use my camera, and I'm like, okay, just forget it, just take the pictures for me. Because he gets all technical on me. So we're not going to talk about the actual camera buttons and the functions, things like that. We're going to talk about, acknowledge that a camera is required for you to take photographs. So whether you're using your phone or a fancy camera, you can use all sorts of tools and your settings. You can learn different ways to use the light and setting up your object to take better pictures. There are all sorts of tools for drawing and painting, like pencils and paintbrushes. There are many types of cameras and different types of lenses. But for this lesson, we're not going to discuss the specifics between taking photos with film cameras. How many remember using film in the camera? Yes. I used to be fascinated with film, and when I was in high school, we took pictures, and we had a black room, and the dark room, and we developed the pictures. And I was just fascinated by all of that. That's been a while ago. So now we have digital cameras, our phones, they take really great pictures, but sometimes, you know, you still have to have the right lighting and the right, putting all your people in the right position, that kind of thing. So, but whether a camera is uses film or is digital, or is part of the cell phone, we have control over how the subject of our photograph is captured. And it influences how others will react when they view our photo. So light, in addition to having a camera or take a photo, the other important thing we need to make a photo is light. In the next few slides, we'll discuss the importance of light in photography. Without light, we would not be able to see the images in the photograph. Light brings a photograph to life. And the camera, how the camera captures the object or subject is impacted by the type of light. So we have natural light and we have other types of light. And the quality of light, which we have a warm light or a cool light, the lighting in our environment plays a role in how the final photo looks or turns out. So here you can see warm light would be like candlelight or a yellowish light, the sun and the moon, and then the bright sun. You have, like this would be your setting sun and then your moon, and then we have like a cloudy day and then the bright day, and then you have your the cooler lights would be when it's cloudy, and then moonlight. Those are your cooler. So then we're going to talk about floodlight exposure. Most cameras will let us manually control settings to compensate or adjust for low light or high light situations. On your camera, you can say it's night or day or setting sun, that kind of thing. You can have settings on there. A photograph has correct exposure when the camera settings are balanced to let in the right amount of light. So here we have underexposure, you have overexposure, and then the correct exposure. If you don't let enough light in, or we have too much light in, so a camera will handle light exposure differently depending on whether the camera uses film or capture an image or is a digital camera. So the sensors in your cell phone, in your digital camera, will compensate for the lighting or what you're in, if you're daylight or in evening, that kind of thing. But sometimes when you take a picture and it turns out blurry, a lot of times it's because of the lighting. So cameras process light exposure based on a combination of aperture, shutter speed, and ISO sensitivity. We'll define these in the next few slides. For this reason, I don't want to get too technical. It's already too technical. But it's good to be familiar with what these camera settings mean, because even if a photographer is well composed, it may not turn out well if it's out of focus. If it is it's too dark or too bright, it's important to note that these settings are controlled differently depending on your specific camera or your cell phone. Some cameras automatically adjust for these depending on how your camera's set up. So aperture is opening in the lens, like the pupil of your eye. It lets light pass through to the film or the sensor. The amount of light transmitted affects the light exposure. And then the aperture controls the depth of the field. So depth of field equals how much of the image is in focus. So you can see the differences in the pictures there. The backgrounds, if you really look at the backgrounds, the person is gonna be more focused, and then your background's gonna be blurry. Smaller aperture, the opening equals bigger. So the bigger the F number, you see F22 and F1.4 is the different. It's totally different. So the higher the F number, your background's gonna be not as blurry. The larger the aperture opening, the smaller the F number, the shallower depth of field. So if you want everything in focus, your F number is gonna be higher. If you want just like your main focus of your subject, the lower the number is gonna be. I know that's very technical. Probably won't even worry about that if you're taking pictures unless you're on a fancy camera. So your shutter speed controls the length of time the lens is open, thereby controlling how much light makes it to the sensor. They are specified as fractions of a second. I don't even think my mind can even focus on that. Faster shutter speeds help limit the blur of motion. Have you ever tried to take a picture of somebody moving? So there's your examples there in those pictures. Slower shutter speeds show the blur of motion. To be able to better see the images in a dark setting, slow down the shutter speed to increase exposure time. So on your digital camera, you can put change it to a darker setting. Like if you're in a dark lit room, but somebody's moving, there's a motion. Sometimes your phone has a motion setting on there. So if you're trying to take a picture of something moving, you want that set. The ISO sensitivity is a numeric value and standard set forth by the International Organization of Standardization. It is a measurement of how sensitive camera film is to light. Remember, film speed used to be 100 or 400. That was that speed. So you could take pictures depending on that, or how the sensor of the digital camera is interacting with the light. So that's the speed. The light source can be natural light, like sunlight, or it can be the light bulb, artificial light. The ISO value impacts the image quality. So you can see the differences, 100, 200, 400, and down at the bottom, the higher numbers are gonna pick up. So your ISO number is gonna impact your quality of the image. Now that we have a very basic understanding of how some of our camera settings affect the image quality, let's focus on the image creativity. We're going to focus on the composition of the photos we want to make. With careful composition, we can intentionally incorporate the elements and principles of art to make pictures with a purpose. This is before we snap our photograph, it assesses what we see in the viewfinder. So if you look through your camera, if you're using a camera with a lens, you want to look through there to see what's in the actual picture. You want to make sure your subject or whatever background you want is in that viewfinder. So let's review our elements and principles of art vocabulary. The elements of art are line, shape, form, space, texture, value, and color. So these are the basic building blocks of the visual art, and that includes photography. These are defined in our Year 1 lesson vocabulary handout. So if that's something that you wanted, the agent could get that printed out for you. We can go back and print that out. And it might be something you have already. The principles of art are proportion, balance, contrast, emphasis, movement, rhythm, and pattern. These are the effects or results that are created based on the elements of art. They are defined in the 1-year vocabulary handout. Year 1 handout. So these principles work off of the elements. So here's a list of concepts for composing a photograph. These are based on the elements and principles of art. In the upcoming slides, we'll look at specific examples of each concept to help us better understand how we compose our photos to make them visually appealing. Several of the photos in the upcoming slides are taken by the University of Kentucky and Kentucky State University students during their participation in the 2022 Picture Kentucky workshop. This is a unique photojournalism workshop started in 2004 by the UK media organization Kentucky Kernel. The current workshop director is David Stevenson. This is assistant professor at the University of Kentucky School of Journalism and Media. So these are the concepts: rule of thirds, framing, leading lines, balance, perspective, viewpoint, depth of field, background, capturing a moment, motion, repetition, and silhouette. So these are the ones we're going to look at. Rule of thirds. When we divide a photo into 3 equal parts, you've got your 3 columns, either way, vertically and horizontally with imagery lines, the points of intersection tend to be natural focal points. So that's where your red circles are, your natural focal points. They create interest in your photo by positioning objects in these areas. So if you think about your photo, you want to position your subject into these. A note about camera viewfinders. Most of the time, the image that the photographer sees through the camera viewfinder or on the screen is the same image that is passing through the lens onto the film or the sensor. But on old point and shoot cameras, the viewfinder is offset from the lens. There are markings visible in the viewfinder to help the photographer properly center and expose. Like if you have a fancy camera, it'll have even markings on when you look through the lens to line up your subjects. So here, it says, for example, we have divided this photo into thirds. Okay, so now you can see, using the red circles, this makes it more interesting. If it was over either way, you wouldn't have the focus on your subject here. So when we see the imagery lines intersect near the donkey's eye, near the man's face, near the difference in the spatial plane of the donkey in the foreground, and then near the man's hand, the lower right. So this is your focusing in on your subject. He's the man feeding the donkey, and you're seeing exactly what he's taking. So when you're framing, you want to position your camera so that the objects in your view create a frame or emphasis for your intended focal point. Having objects in both the foreground and the background create depth. So we can see the trees in the background, but we see the girl and the horse closer to us. Here, the fencing and the position of the person frame the horse's head. Does your eye go to the horse first or to the person first? What do you guys see when you look at it at the first?
Horse.
The horse. So it's really framing that horse's head to make you look at that first. Here, because the photographs are 2-dimensional, they only have height and width, no true depth. So you use strong lines to guide the viewer's eye. These leading lines can pull us in and tell our eyes where to go. Here, the headers that span over the stall doors from the lines, see the big strong lines going back, that emphasizes the perspective and draws your eye through to the end of the barn. See what that's doing? Okay. So it makes you want to look back all the way to that door in the very back and the horse behind this first one. So to me, that makes it interesting. If you just focused in on the two at the front, you would miss the barn, all the details in that barn. So here we're talking about balance. The positioning of a subject in the photograph may create a visual weight, pulling our eyes to it. In a balanced photograph, our eyes will keep moving around because the weight of the main subject is balanced by other things in the photograph. Here, the 3 wall hangings in the upper left corner of this photograph counteract the visual weight of the person at the bottom right of the photograph. Although we may initially look at the person in the lower right of the photograph first, our eyes will shift back and forth between the wall hangings in the upper left and the subject in the lower right. You feel yourself do that? Okay. Perspective or viewpoint. Positioning the camera at an out of the ordinary angle and not at eye level can create visual interest and help tell a story. I think if you were higher up, you're not going to get the perspective that they're wanting you to see in this picture. Experiment with the difference in making a photo. Up close, far away. Here we may feel like we are in the same space as the person in the photograph. Does anyone feel like they need to check their surroundings to make sure there are no cars coming down the road? Yeah, because you feel like you're right there on the road with him, right? That's a cool photo. Okay, depth of field. So this gives a sense of depth to the photographs and make the viewer feel like they are part of the physical space by capturing objects in the foreground, the middle ground, and the background. So we have the main person, then you can kind of see people are way out or they're still up close. As we discussed in the previous slide on aperture, the function controls how much of the foreground, the middle ground, or the background that will be in focus. Here, because the well-recognized subject is in focus, even though he is not positioned in the center of the photograph, his right side positioning feels comfortable. But it's a recognizable face too. Okay, background. Pay attention to what is in the background as you're looking through the camera. Items in the background may distract you from the main subject, or the background may provide the right amount of contrast. Remember to look beyond your subject before you snap the photo to make sure you're pleased with what you see. You can experiment by changing your angle or physically moving an object out of your view. Here, the contrast against the background provides the subject's orange hat shows up better. Like if she was closer over in the brownish grass, her hat would kind of fade in. So they put her in front of the gravel or the lighter color road, so the hat would show up. Maybe if they were at this angle and showing, the hat would kind of disappear into that brownish grass, orangish grass. Let's see. So you need to make sure the background enhances what your subject and not distract from or take away from. Capturing a moment. In reality, all photographers capture moments, but in this case, we're referring to the moment that is a part of the bigger story. Try to capture special interactions that help tell a story. You may need to take several photographs to capture the subject at the height of action. You might need to increase your shutter speed to catch that action. Here in the photograph, the photographer has captured a special moment of hugs and excitement between subjects. We may subconsciously fill in the blanks about what has just happened or what will happen next. So we can all, maybe they just ran into each other and they hadn't seen each other. So you can, in your mind, you can tell the story, what happened or what's about to happen. Motion. You can experiment with shutter speed, the movement of the main subject, or use a tripod to make intentional motion a focal point. For this image, the photographer noted that the subject is the calm in the shot. So out around is calm. It's nothing's, the motion is still there. As the action happens all around him. So here, repetition. Repetition of elements or principles. You look for strong graphic shapes or colors that are repeated. So here we have the stools and the red, the flowers, the curtains, the booths. This is a place in Frankfurt, if y'all, it may be closed now, I'm not sure, but it's right on the river, and there's a little park in the river, and it's like on the cliff. So there's a cliff and this little restaurant and the river, but it's in Frankfurt. I forget the name of it though. You want to look for strong graphic shapes and colors. If you include something that is in opposition or in contrast of the repeated shape or color, then the element that is different will become the focal point. So here we may be mesmerized by the black and white checker floor, or the identical setup of each booth. We notice the person sitting on the stool because they break up the repetitive pattern of the red and round stool. A lot going on in that picture. A silhouette. When subjects are lit from behind, we may see a dark shape outline and interest and contrast. Using a small aperture, the high f-stop helps capture detail in the background. With a point and shoot camera, you focus on the light in the background. Here we see the dome of the Kentucky Capitol. In the silhouette form, the scaffolding for the maintenance work is prominent. So you can see all the scaffolding and just the silhouette of the top of the Capitol building there. So this is color or black and white. In recent years, most photographs are made in color, but when photos are in black and white, the impact can be very different. Totally different. Same picture, different color, but it just brings out different things that you're going to see. Here, the principle of repetition that is very prominent in the original color photo on the left is not obvious when depicted in black and white. The same image can look very different in color versus black and white. We've probably all seen differences in that in our own photos. Now that we've seen examples of composition using elements and principles of art, although careful composition usually leads to images that are visually pleasing, it's still okay to love a photo that is blurry or underexposed or overexposed. Some of them can still be pictures that you love, but if you're looking to put your photo in an exhibit or to be judged, you really want to show originality, content, the clarity, and the technical competence, and the composition. Those are things that judges will be looking for. Doesn't mean the photo can't be still special to you, but it may be, you may think about, maybe I shouldn't put that in mind to be judged. So what's next? Then, once you get the principles down, then you can look at those buttons on your camera, those little adjustments that you can make. Get out there and take some photos. Experiment with lighting and position of your subject. Make sure we've probably all got photos in our camera on our phones that need to be deleted, right? We've got multiples of the same photo, that kind of thing. So go in there and get rid of the photos that don't have meaning for you, and so you have more room to make better photos. And then display and share your favorite photos. I don't know that I'll be able to answer many questions, but you can ask if you would like. I'm sure maybe one of us agents could come up with an answer, or we could look it up, right? I think taking photos it's fun, you know. I did do some judging at some county fairs, and there were some great photos. But I think just applying some of these principles would help make the photos more clear, lighting and things like that, looking at the backgrounds, and putting the subject where it really needs to be. So, just little details. Comments or questions?
If you want to see some good photography, the Owensboro Photography Club has an exhibit at the gallery at Kentucky Wesleyan College now. And we're not a big club, but there was like 38 different photos with about 8 photographers. But most of those do not use the auto settings on their phones or on their cameras, mostly cameras. Mm-hmm. But I didn't hear, I wasn't paying a lot of attention because I wasn't going to have to teach the lesson. But on the cameras, have you noticed one of the little round buttons, you see a flower, you see a man that looks like he's running, and some different things. Mm-hmm. If you're going to take a motion photo, then you need to take that and put it on the running man, because that running man means motion. If you want something up close or a flower, use that flower. I mean, it's all, and if you're not setting your different other different things, that's all automatic, but that just helps the camera catch that a little better. You don't really have it that much in your phone, but you do have it on the digital cameras.
Yes, and then there's always apps on your phone that help you take better pictures. But if you have a fancy camera, there are lots of settings that help you get the better picture. So here's some references, things like that. If you were looking for more information for yourself, then we can get you the websites or print this off where you could look it up, that kind of thing.